Hey, welcome back to KP Unpacked. This is where the biggest ideas in AEC, AI, and innovation, they all collide in one podcast. It's powered by KP Reddy Co. And this is where we break down the trends, the technology, the discussions, and the strategies that are shaping the built environment and beyond. My name is Jeff Echols. I head up the mastermind and incubator programs here at KP Reddy Co. And in this version, I'm actually joined by KP Reddy. Hi,
or
KP.
the AI version thereof.
I am joined by a deep fake that we call KP.
It's the rare situation where the AI is actually more interesting than the actual person.
Well, you said that, not me. No, we joke about it, but I've been recording so many different versions of this podcast. I've been interviewing our research team, and then Frank Lazaro, our AI advisor, and we typically, this is a little inside baseball, but Frank and I typically record a couple of episodes a week, and we record episodes with our mastermind members and speakers, and so it feels like it's almost become rare that you and I sit down and record anymore, even though we do every week. So. Yeah. It's just a lot of episodes in between.
No, that's what makes us the number one podcast in the AEC space.
Your mom, my mom, Frank's mom.
We got everybody.
The moms of everybody on our research team. This is the number one AEC podcast amongst moms in America.
Yeah. You know what's funny you say that, right? I see this pattern on LinkedIn that I find fascinating. Is that a CEO of a 2,500 person company will post something and gets like 100 reactions.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, dude, their employees not know that that's career limiting behavior? You have 2,500 employees and like 100 react to a CEO's post.
Yeah.
And I'm like, did anyone not get the memo? Like, social media flattery is the best form of flattery. Like, I find it fascinating. I mean, I track when you guys don't like my stuff or comment on my stuff. I have a little list.
I know it irritates you when I give you the thumbs down.
Yeah,
on your posts.
That would be awesome.
All right, well,
okay. I would like it would be more fun.
Wait till next week.
If you guys started trolling me, that would actually be more fun than just liked it. This is
game
awesome.
on.
Yeah, just like game troll on. Me.
So here, I'm going to create an AI agent that creates troll comments. It's going to do is troll your LinkedIn post.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm going to do. Okay.
But don't you wonder is there anyone on these companies' teams or CEOs are full of ego, right? Like, do they look at who reacted and who didn't?
I don't know.
I mean, I wonder. It's just like,
I think you and I are very plugged in on LinkedIn, obviously. I mean, we come here every week to unpack one of your LinkedIn posts, and you're posting several times a day. And we also know, right? We know that there's this confirmation bias and there's this bubble. And even though, so and so and so and so and so and so may be connections on LinkedIn, are they actually on LinkedIn? We have these kind of conversations, and it's not just LinkedIn that we talk about that, but I think there's also the reality that of those 2,500 employees, X percent of them are not even on LinkedIn, and then another Y percent or whatever, I'm running out of letters all of a sudden, they're not actually active.
Yeah.
And so there's some nuances there, I suppose.
Yeah. I had someone tell me one time, like, I was like, hey, like, are you on LinkedIn? And this is their reaction. They said, I'm not looking for a job. Why would I be active on LinkedIn?
Yeah.
People only get active on LinkedIn when they're getting ready to look for a job.
Well,
and we live in such a bubble, you and I do, where we think of it as more of a communications platform than a recruiting platform. But I think a lot of people still, look at it that way.
They do. I mean, it's the 2007 attitude. It's the 2007 LinkedIn attitude, but it's also not lost to me that in the industry that we serve, right? The
Mhm.
AEC industry, often slow to adopt. We talk about that all the time,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
we'll probably touch on that a little bit here today in this episode. But slow to adopt a lot of things. I was, I don't know how long it's been now, 10 years ago, 12 years ago, I was talking about using um, social media for for marketing, business development, for architecture firms.
Mhm.
And at some point, I sort of got tired of it. I'm like, when I started talking about it, it was maybe a little bit early in social
Mhm.
media overall, but it was
Yeah.
way early for social
Crazy.
media and AEC.
Right.
And then a few years later, I've moved on, right? I'm tired of talking about it. And I started getting requests to do talks that I had been doing for years.
Yeah.
And I remember saying this from stage. I was keynoting a national conference, and I was just, for whatever reason, I was tired or I was hungry or whatever, my filters turned off. And one of the first things I saw this in the recording, one of the first things I said was, "I cannot believe you paid me to come up here to talk about this." It's 2016 or whatever it was, 2018 maybe. I cannot believe that you paid me in this year to come up here and talk about this, because I thought this was old news.
Yeah.
And that's that bubble, right? That we live in, that we exist in. Is it old news? Yeah, it is old news.
Yeah.
Is it old news for everybody? No. And maybe not. Maybe news isn't the right term. Maybe it's just that there are laggards. Um, but the reality is that there are plenty of people
Yeah.
that do. Back to your point, that do think about it as a recruiting tool or a job search tool.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny. There's a couple things there. One, I can almost always tell when somebody's going to start looking for a job. All of a
Sure.
sudden, they start
Yeah.
reacting to my LinkedIn post. All of a sudden, they start people that I have not talked to in 3 to 4 years. They
Yeah.
start
Yeah.
liking my stuff. They start commenting. And then, of course, within 30 days, I get a message. Hey, I've been really, really reevaluating where I'm at. And I think
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
going to start the process of looking,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Do you have 5 minutes? And I'm like, yeah, sure. You know, and so I get on a call with them, like, yeah, I'm gonna start looking, process. And I'm like, okay, like I didn't know, right?
Yeah. It's
Like I didn't.
predictable. Yeah.
Pretty predictable.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
second comment you made, right, which I think is interesting, and I'm not, um, in private, I throw lots of people under the bus. Publicly, I'm a little bit more nuanced, read into it, but I'm watching all these conferences in AEC tech.
Hmm. Yeah.
There was just one out here in California where I live. Like there was just one here a couple weeks ago.
Which one?
But they're all over. They're all over, right? All
Yeah.
these conferences, and I'm seeing something really interesting, which is even the conversations happening at these conferences that are supposed to be like these new hot take things.
Yeah.
They're off by like a year and a half.
At
And
least.
at least, right? And when I'm and these are tech conferences. This isn't AIA, the alphabet soup
Okay.
stuff. It's
All
like
right. Sure. Okay.
innovation, tech, whatever.
Hmm.
And what I'm realizing is I think, I mean, I've talked to you about this. I'm probably going to do 4 speaking gigs or 5 speaking gigs this year.
Hmm.
Last year I did like 40.
Yeah. Yeah. You've cut
Like
way back this
I've
year.
cut way back because I'm too busy. I'm
Hmm.
too busy doing stuff, building stuff. And quite honestly, I'm kind of tired of sharing. I just
Well,
really am, right? It's like, oh, wow, like no one does anything with it. Why am I out here? I mean, I get
that.
paid,
Yeah.
right? But like, well,
Yeah.
I get
That's
paid. That's
that's
fine.
part of the point. Yeah.
I get paid, but which it doesn't hurt anything. But I think this idea of like, I'm out here talking about stuff and nobody's listening,
Hmm.
and what they want to hear is what everyone's talking about at all these other conferences,
Yeah.
right?
It's an
And I'm
echo
like,
chamber.
yeah, yeah. And so I just feel like my observation has been, and I've talked to several people that have been on the circuit, and they're kind of saying the same thing. Like, man,
Hmm.
like it's a bunch of people talking about the same stuff from
Yeah.
5 years ago.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, I mean, I don't think it's any secret that event organizers are often looking around going, okay, well, who did they have and who did they have and who did they have and who was a draw and things like that. And so there's lots of different examples that we could come up with of this, right? But it's sort of that race to mediocrity. How do if we're just sort of comparing notes and say, oh, they had them, let's get them. Then that's where you're going to be versus actually thinking creatively, thinking critically, and seeing, maybe what's a little bit controversial, or who are the actual practitioners.
I think it's partly that, right? I mean, we have our 5 events this year, so I'll be speaking at those 5 events. But even at our events, I'm not really speaking. I'm just trying to get people to open up, and we kind of joke around. It's KP's group therapy. I'm just trying to get people to say things that they're thinking, which is a problem. Enough people in our industry will not say what they're thinking.
Yeah.
Like I think I had a post earlier this week about, I talked to all these ENR 500 CEOs, and they're quote unquote investing heavily in innovation. And then they're telling me, like, I don't think we're going to be here in 5 years.
Yeah.
But they're not telling their employees that. They can't tell their employees, like, hey, by the way, we're not going to be here in 5 years, right?
By the way, you ought to get on LinkedIn and start liking and commenting things.
Now. Update your LinkedIn profile. No, and so I think it's interesting. I'm just finding that I would rather talk to smaller groups of people and then simply ask the question. They're like, oh, that's a great idea, KP. I'm like, good. What the fuck are you going to do about it? I just gave you a great idea. Now what? Don't tell me like, oh, you're going to study it. And like, I don't have time. Like, I'm learning that there's people that will pay you for your time. There's not a lack of those people.
Right.
But I just don't want to spend time with people that want to pay me for my time, so to speak, and aren't going to do anything with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, what's the point?
Yeah. Even just on like the human level, whether you're a parent or a friend or whatever the role is that you're playing, it's frustrating. My mom's voice is in the back of my head, right? It's like, if you don't have anything nice to say, you don't say anything at all. It's the nicest way I could say it is, it can be really frustrating when you try to help someone that won't help themselves.
Yeah.
And that happens a lot, right? And when you go out, like you said, when you go out and speak and so on. But you brought up something a minute ago about our events, right? The 5 that we'll have this year. They're giant. Well, they're not giant. They're conversations, right? These are not speaking events. This is not where you come and you hear a bunch of speakers. You sit there and you listen, whatever. These are 5 conversations that are having, and they really reflect the way that our mastermind groups work, or our mastermind groups run, right? They're conversations amongst the most innovative in the AEC industry. So if that's something you want to get in on, you should come to these events.
Right. But they're also doers. They're not talkers.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I think the talkers don't show back up to our events.
No, they don't.
Because they realize just showing up and being a talking head, blah, 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 where we have people, at our events are like, hey, did you check out Grok 3.0? I did this and I did that. I wrote that. And all of a sudden you realize, like, oh, these people are not PowerPoint people.
Yeah.
These are GitHub people. Like, these are people that are doing things, trying things, not just like, oh, innovation. Let me tell you about innovation curves. No one cares about your innovation curve. Curve or whatever, like any of that stuff. So anyway, we digress, so to speak.
We do.
Yeah.
We're here to unpack. This is my, I didn't even get to say this yet. This is my weekly opportunity to say, hey, KP, what were you thinking when you posted that on LinkedIn? That's why we come here, to unpack one of the posts that KP puts up on LinkedIn every week. If you're not following him, you should go right now over to LinkedIn. That's LinkedIn.com. It's not just a job search place. Go to LinkedIn.com and search KP, the letter K, the letter P, Reddy, Reddy. You won't be able to connect with him. I'm assuming you're still full, right? You're still maxed out on your connections, but you can follow KP. He posts 2 or 3 times a day, and his posts are inspired by conversations that he's having, presentations that he's giving, advisory work that he's doing, research that's going on inside KP Reddy Co. and other places. And this is my opportunity every week to say, okay, what was the inspiration for that thing that you posted the other day? And so we're gonna do that today. We're gonna unpack something that KP wrote about AEC technology companies. So, per the way that we usually do this, I'm going to read it, and then KP and I are going to talk about it. It goes like this. Ultimately, an AEC technology company should have an owner value proposition. Why? If your value proposition is only valuable to the AEC firm, they have to fit you into their current budgets. If they can leverage your technology to sell the owner, then you could possibly create revenue for the AEC firm, but as a minimum, your spend gets reimbursed by the owner. Why don't startups do this? It's a lot of work to build marketing for an indirect customer. Owners are diverse. There's a good bit to unpack there. So where do we start? First of all, why? What was happening? What conversation was going on? What inspired you to post this?
Yeah, I think so. I think I've mentioned it before. Last year, I decided my first book from 2011 was BIM for Owners and Developers, and my big hypothesis back then was that BIM was going to transform. The most impacted by BIM would be owners and developers. I was 100% wrong. 100% wrong.
How many times do authors come on
Yeah.
to this podcast and say I was 100% wrong?
Yeah. I'm going to take my book, run it through AI, and have it create the counterfactual book.
And it'll be right?
It'll be right. I'm rewriting history.
That's awesome.
So the general thinking was, I'm talking to these owners, and they're like, look, we saw no benefit from BIM. Zero. Nothing.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, it could be that buildings have taken longer to build, the quality is lower, and they've costed more because of BIM. Sorry, Autodesk. Like, it turns out the value has not been to the end stakeholder.
Mm-hmm.
Then maybe the value has been to the vendors, which is AEC. We are all vendors. That's why we respond to RFPs. That's why we go through procurement, because we are a vendor. We are we're no different than Dunder Mifflin in many ways, right? So we are a commodity vendor that serves an owner. So if we look at that and we say, well, all this technology, all these tools have really helped the vendors become more efficient, the vendors to get the value, and there hasn't really been a pass through to the owner, then there's no demand pull through, right? And so what happens is we have construction tech companies that are doing a really good job of tracking problems.
Okay.
I'm going to track the punch lists.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to track, I'm going to review contracts, right? I mean, that's not value. That's like perfunctory, right? We're not changing the process. The owner is not. How does the owner benefit from AI reviewing a construction contract?
Right.
Not really, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so long term, what happens is a lot of these companies just kind of peter out, right? They're just not going to get anywhere because there is no traction from the owner saying, I demand this. Like, we have one portfolio company that's doing a fantastic job with this, where the owners are finding out about their product and saying, why is the GC buying this? We should be hiring you because we're getting a ton of value. And then when the project ends, the contractor's walking off with our data. We want to own the data. This is our data. This is
Yep.
high value for us, right? And so, but I also understand why, right? So the why do startups do this? Because they can get a list. Here's all the GCs. So really, the GCs and the design teams become kind of a channel to market. Because if I go talk to a general contractor, they have 100 projects going on.
Right.
If I go talk to an owner, they might have 3. Like,
Okay. Yep.
if you go talk to Georgia Tech, how many construction projects do they have going on campus right now? 3?
I don't know.
4?
Yeah.
Not
Depends on
counting
how many
bathroom
dorms they're building.
right? Not counting bathroom renovations, right? Like if you just take new,
Yeah. Sure.
so
Yeah. New
I'm going to
construction.
spend all this energy to build a relationship with the university to get one project.
Mm-hmm.
Or I go to a GC that has 100 active projects and I have access to 100 projects. So
Sure.
the go-to-market scaling makes 100% sense. However, if you can arm your customer, if it's a general contractor or designer, engineer, whatever, with a value prop to their end customer,
Mm-hmm.
now they're actually creating value. Now they
Right.
might even be able to charge the owner for this. Like if you think about it, why don't GCs charge owners for BIM?
There's no value prop for the owner.
Right. It's like, oh, you're using a tool to, I remember being in meetings early days of BIM where, architects would try to charge owners for BIM, and some of them were successful at it. Much
Mm-hmm.
like they
Yeah.
used to
In
charge
the
for
early
back in the
days
day,
of
CAD
CAD. Yeah.
time, right? Charge for
Mm-hmm.
CAD
Yeah.
time, right?
Yep.
They try to do that. And so when they would tell the owner, smart owners, right? Smart owners, they would say, like, so you're going to use BIM to deliver a higher quality project faster. Like, why am I paying? Like, you're already in that way. Are you not delivering a quality product? If you deliver it faster, don't you benefit? Right? Like, so.
Well, here's the thing, though. It hasn't been delivered faster.
No, it hasn't.
This is a different episode, but
Right.
I'll take the other side of that. The CAD and BIM haven't created value for the design side either.
No.
That's a
Right.
different episode.
It's cool. Yeah. I think it's the BIM is Dead 2 episode. We already have a BIM is Dead 1 episode.
Yeah.
BIM is Dead 2 episode.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, so I think if you could actually, so I think for a startup there, right? It's a lot, right? I mean, I've run startups, so I get it. I'm very empathetic towards startups being focused and all that. But I do think at some point for the longevity to build a brand with owners, to build a value prop for owners where they can actually, they'll ask for it,
Mm-hmm.
right? I used to sit on the technology advisory board for Intel, and I learned a lot about Intel through that process.
Sure.
And this was back in the day, Intel Inside. And I learned a lot about it where I was like, hey, nobody buys Intel. You and I,
Right.
as a consumer, we don't buy
Yeah,
it.
that's a great
Back in the
point.
day,
Yeah.
right? We bought a Dell
Mhm.
computer, we bought a gateway,
Yep.
and Intel's whole thing is like, well, we want you to make sure you buy the one with Intel chips in it, not the AMD chips.
Mm-hmm.
So if you
say
remember
Intel inside.
those old Dell commercials on TV,
Yeah.
at the end of it, there'd be like a ding, 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 with the
Mhm.
Intel logo would come on,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And that was their market. And so what I learned from Intel was, even though you may not be serving the end customer directly, right? They're not buying from you directly. You should be influencing and marketing to them in a brand awareness way so that people ask. Because, back then when we walked into CompUSA to buy a computer, listen up, kids, there's a thing called CompUSA. And we
I
went
think
into
I
the
just
store to buy a
stepped
computer.
out of the Wayback Machine.
So we'd go to CompUSA, we'd get our box of Windows 95 discs.
How old are you? My God.
I'm younger than you. That's the good news. You'd go get your Windows 95 discs out of the box, and you go to the computer, and you'd have this. You're like, which Pentium?
Mhm.
Pentium 2,
Yeah.
right?
What
Remember
size were those discs?
They're little
The
CD-ROMs.
5.5-inch floppies?
No. This is post-flop, okay? We had CD-ROMs, okay?
Okay.
I don't know how old you
Okay.
are. I don't know how old you are,
A
but
little older than you.
punch card Jeff.
Yeah.
So I think so anyway, but you'd ask for a Pentium,
Yeah.
you know, if they
Pentium
showed you
processors.
right, if they showed you two PCs, AMD, I don't know those guys. They don't have
Mhm.
a cool, you know, like so you know, so you literally bought Intel. So I think there is a strategy for startups to try to build good brand and awareness with owners. And sometimes it's simple things, right? So if you're delivering to a GC, that your in-state deliverables that they give to the owner, maybe it's, you know, like we have a company, Green Badger, that does lead reporting. They sell to general contractors, right?
Mhm.
But hopefully, if they're listening, hopefully all the reports that the GCs get that they're turning into the owners are powered by Green Badger,
Right.
right? Insist on that branding, on the reporting and the output that ends up at the owners. Because
Mhm.
then they start seeing that and the owner goes like, Green Badger? What do you mean? You know, then the next GC shows up and it doesn't say powered by Green Badger.
Right.
You guys not using Green Badger? I heard they're the standard. They're the
Mhm.
de facto standard for lead reporting. What are you using, a spreadsheet? That's insane. You know, how do I know, right? How do I know it's quality? How do I know reports quality? So I think there are subtle and interesting things that startups can do to generate brand awareness with owners. So if the owners start to ask their vendors, the AEC firms,
Right.
by name, like, oh, aren't you using this?
Yeah. Yeah, and as I'm listening to you say this, I mean, I agree with all of it. And as I listen to you say this, I think, you know, in a way, this is a very meta conversation, and not like meta, but meta. Um, because I mean, we're talking about AEC techs, we're talking about startups, we're talking about that value proposition for the owner, and and then kicking back and forth. Did BIM create any value for the owner? You say no. I say BIM didn't create any value for the design side, for the vendor side either. And I think one of the things that may be the elephant in the room, that maybe on the vendor side, that a lot of people are overlooking, which is becoming more and more dangerous every day, is what's the value prop that the vendor's creating,
Mm-hmm.
right? This conversation is about the AEC tech firm, about the startup. But if we zoom out, right, we'd better start having conversations um, with our owners. Maybe we should
Yeah.
create something called like an integrated owners forum or something. But we need to start understanding value propositions for the owners across the board.
Yeah. No, 100%. So I think, um, I think when you look at, you know, the owner's perspectives, I think because, you know, they maybe build one building a year or
Hmm.
whatnot. It's hard. And I think I have a general rule, right? When you're hiring someone, anyone, accountant, branding consultant, you know, we just went through a big rebrand and um, I'm not going to plug the firm because I paid them a lot of money. So I shouldn't have it. If they want to give me a kickback and discount my stuff, I'll plug them. But no, right now you just got paid, guys. To sponsor something. But they did a fantastic job. So I think when you hire anyone to do anything, there's two vectors you're looking at:
Okay.
capacity and competence,
Okay.
right? So I would say, why do I hire Jeff?
Hmm.
It's probably both. You're more competent as a podcast host than I am.
Okay.
And I don't have time, right? I don't
Sure.
have time to get good at it. I may not even have, I mean, you have to wrangle me for this 1 hour a week. You got to wrangle me down, right? We you know, Mr. Reschedule 2 minutes before we're supposed to be on air. I mean, like, right. So if you look at competence and capacity as the two vectors of hiring anything, right? Why do you hire an accountant? I don't have either, right? I was talking to an owner the other day. I was like, this guy, he really understands how to design and build a building.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of asked the question. I was like, why don't you just do it, bring it in house? He's like, oh man. Because then when we're really busy with the building, I won't have enough people because I can't hire that many people.
Yeah.
And then when we're not designing buildings, what do I do with all these people? So
Okay.
I'm building $1 billion facility. I ramp up an internal AE team, which he could. He had the capabilities to manage a team. So what, I'm going to hire 50 people, and they're really busy drawing, call it for a year or two, and then they're done. And then during that year, I can't hire 100. I probably maybe need 100 people drawing, and not 50. So it's the ebbs and flows of capacity, right?
Sure.
And then sometimes it's competency, right? Sometimes it's just sheer competency. Like, I don't know how to do that. And for a lot of owners, they're CFO types. They have no they have no either capacity or competency. So I think if you look at those are the two vectors, I am now starting to see owners that are saying, you know what? I can hire the competency, and I think I have a pretty good idea of how to manage capacity. And KP introduced me to these AI tools that are allowing me to do things with less capacity and sometimes less competency. I'm going to do it myself.
Yeah.
I'm going to self-perform my design. I'm going to self-perform my construction.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you already see a lot of these, and for decades, you've seen a lot of these owners that have a facilities team or a construction team, whatever they call it, and they're the ones that end up interfacing with the vendor side, right? With the design side. So it seems like they're only half a step from that, and have historically been half a step from what you're describing. And if you're on the design side outside of the owner environment, then that might be a threat that you pay attention to.
But I do think startups, from a longevity perspective, back to the original post, I think you actually, you're the AEC firm, whether it's design or construction or whatnot, they are not going to be able to frame the value prop to the owner nearly as well as you can. And you should think of them as a co-marketing partner to drive that message and behavior to the owners. The worst thing that on one hand, you're like, oh, I'm working with this contractor and they're paying us a lot of money for our product, and we're their little secret. We're their little special weapon. I'm like, that's good and bad, right? The bad news is the owner doesn't know who you are. Right. The good news is the owner, the contractor is seeing a lot of value and doesn't want to share, right? Like, they've talked about it before. Like, if you find a great babysitter, never share that with your friends. Because they'll always pay $1 more, right?
Right. Also, if you are on the startup side, it's your responsibility to give that GC or whoever it is the story to tell. Right. And if you want to fly under the radar, what's the story? There's still a story to be told. If you want to be front and center, it's a different story, but there's a story to be told. So as your marketing partner or whatever you call them, you need to be through your branding, through your customer experience, through all of those things, you need to be giving them the story to tell. You don't want to leave it to chance. So, I think the example of Green Badger is a good one, right? And that's more of maybe an explicit example, like, hey, put it in the template that gets printed out that ends up on Joe's desk or whatever. That's an explicit example, but also, what do you want to accompany that? Here's our report, and what's the Green Badger? Well, they're the industry standard, like what you said earlier, right? You want them to tell that story, but you're going to have to teach them to tell that story in some way.
Yeah, and I think it's also interesting, right? In the current construct of how we design and build buildings, how are you getting? It's amazing how many startups I talk to that don't understand the specification system. They don't understand Division One. I don't like if you want to be truly part of the project, right? If you want to be of impact, you need to be part of the specifications. You need to be part of Division One. You need and they're like, "What are you even talking about, KP? We're just selling software." I'm like, no, or the owner is like part of the project requirements. You're written in into it, and I'll tell you, back in the day, BIM days, Autodesk did a fantastic job with this. They had BIM requirements documents, and they went to GSA, and they went to U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. They went to all these big owners and said, BIM is the new standard. Just like you wouldn't let your architecture firm, fax you drawings, make them email you PDFs these days. You're not going to let, you're not going to let them use CAD anymore. They have to use BIM. And they spent millions upon millions to create, the GSA BIM standard. And their theory, it was a smart strategy. The theory was, if you get the largest owners in the world standardizing on a technology, and then creating a requirements document as part of the procurement process, then everybody has to follow suit. It's just how it is. And
it'll trickle down.
Right. And I think, yes, Autodesk did that by flying a bunch of people around and doing a bunch of stuff. It was very expensive. But look, I think with the right game plan and branding strategy for a startup, I think you can do the same thing. But I think you also have to, beyond the execution and marketing around it, I think if you're starting a startup tomorrow to sell to GCs, to sell to architects, whatever, you have to be designing in a way to thinking about how the owner benefits, how the owner or developer benefits.
Yeah.
And I think if you're not thinking about it and mapping it out, what that value stack looks like, I don't think you'll make it.
Yeah. I mean, that brings it, of course, full circle back to the original post that we've been talking about, and that's it, right? The storytelling, the template, the requirements, all of that. That's sort of that's part of the process, certainly, but it's got to start with what is the value proposition to the owner, and it's not efficiency on the vendor side. That's not a value prop to the owner. And it never, and this is part of my argument. Again, we'll do this as a separate episode at some point, but that promise of efficiency that came with CAD, AutoCAD, that came with Revit, BIM, I don't believe has been realized, because the quote unquote capability drove this movement to add more and more into the project. And I don't think it sped the timeline up at all. I don't think it made anything in terms of deliverable. I don't think it made anything more efficient. And I also believe it drove more litigation and the things that bogged the whole industry down. So we can debate that on another episode.
Yeah. No, I think that would be a great conversation to have, because look, I've never seen a user community of a software write an open letter to the CEO of a software company.
Yeah.
Yeah. I haven't seen a bunch of CMOs writing an open letter to Salesforce with their grievances. Only
Right.
Autodesk has attracted an open letter from leaders of an entire industry to complain. Right. I mean, to me, that's just fascinating. It's just a fascinating thing. But
yeah, it is. And if you keep your ear to the ground, you have conversations throughout the industry with these users, as you call them. I mean, there's plenty of disgruntledness, if that's even a word, not without reason.
Yeah. I was talking to a founder the other day about this stuff, and I said, look, you should aspire to have such a large customer base that's spending so much money with you that they write an open letter. That's winning. It's like
Yeah,
I told someone one time, like, for me, winning is the Department of Justice shows up because I'm monopolizing a market.
sure.
That's
Yeah,
a great reason to get that phone call. Like,
yeah,
oh, I am dominating a market. I've gotten on your radar. Okay, that's winning too.
yeah. Well, and you think about that letter and the names, the firms that
Mhm.
were represented on that letter, the signatories, right? And you go, how many billions of dollars does that, or maybe even more? I mean, it might be up into the trillions.
Mhm.
Um, how much does that represent? It's a lot.
Can
Um,
I tell you something else besides that from a business operations perspective?
mhm,
That is a sheer failure from a large company to have the appropriate customer management processes in place.
mhm,
How do you let your entire I mean, a large number of your customer base, that it escalates to a point that that's how they have to express themselves?
mhm.
Like, why weren't these conversations happening ahead of time, being put around closed doors? So either they did and they were being obtuse and just like, well, we don't care what our customers say. We're going to charge them whatever. We're going to do whatever, which, that's a failure too. But my sense is more that the right people were not having the right conversations with these leaders and they never engaged. I've always found that if you give a customer a platform and a voice to share with you and do something about it, they're not going to go out in the public space and complain about you.
Mhm.
They're more likely to go into a public space and complain because they haven't been heard. They don't
Yeah.
feel like they've been heard.
Mhm.
That's why they do that.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think that's really it's a customer relationship
Right.
breakdown by a very large company. By the way, if you guys Google this or whatever, it's old news. It's what, 2 years old now, right? It's
Two,
not
yeah, it's about 2 years.
been a
Yep.
minute. So we're behind the times. But I do think it's that if you're not creating value. By the way, those same people would not have complained if the end customers were like, we can't, like, of course you're using Revit, like, it's the best, like, we depend, we'll pay you more, there's value. Um,
Right.
when customers are complaining about the cost escalation of your product, that says a lot about the value you're creating is being created for that customer.
Yeah. Yeah. And their complaint was the cost escalation with negligible value creation,
Right.
right? With any sort of improvement in the product, et cetera. So, and I think having some, insight into that particular example, I think it started with your first point and ended with your second point. It was both of those, right? It
Mhm.
was it was the obtuse and communication. Um, so that you're right. I mean that's a case study. Um, yeah,
So,
it's
yeah.
yep.
So
No, you
general
hit
rule, startups, spend time with your customer and spend just as much time with your customer's customer,
yeah,
and
absolutely,
you'll never go wrong.
exactly. The post that we have been unpacking is from KP Reddy on LinkedIn. It says ultimately, an AEC technology company should have an owner value proposition, and that's not necessarily your customer; it's the owner, the building owner, the client of the architecture, engineering, construction firm. Ultimately, an AEC technology company should have an owner value proposition. Why? If your value proposition is only valuable to the AEC firm, they have to fit you into their current budgets. If they can leverage your technology to sell the owner, then you could possibly create revenue for the AEC firm, but as a minimum, your spend gets reimbursed by the owner. Why don't startups do this? It's a lot of work to build marketing for an indirect customer. Owners are diverse. So KP and I have been unpacking this as we do this every week. We take a look at one of the things he's posted in the past week. So if you're not following KP on LinkedIn, you're in the dark. I'm sorry. That's just it, right? You don't have any idea what's coming. You don't have any idea what we're talking about. You're having to go create an account. It's LinkedIn, LinkedIn.com. And then you go and you find KP Reddy and follow him because he's posted several times a day with great insights on all sides, right? Today we're talking about startups, but in the way that they serve not only AEC firms but also owners. So we've gone full circle here in basically the built environment economy. So follow him on LinkedIn. You won't be disappointed. And then come back here next week and we will unpack another of his posts. So thanks for listening. As always, in the show notes, our production crew will pull links to the things that are important, things that need links that we talked about. So just go down into the show notes, find those links, and you can go find this article that we're talking about, et cetera, or this letter that we've been talking about. And also, especially if you're watching this on YouTube, I guess this is really the easiest, maybe the only place you can do this. But anytime you watch or listen to one of these and you have questions or comments or a recommendation for something in the future, just drop in the comments. We love to hear that kind of stuff. And maybe it will shape a future post from KP Reddy himself. We'll see. There's a lottery system. I don't know how it works. I know 2 years in a row I did not get banana ball tickets, so I don't know how lotteries work. Anyway, KP, thanks for joining me as always. Been a great conversation and look forward to doing it again next week.
All right. Thanks, Jeff. Good seeing you.
Yeah, absolutely. And everybody that's out there, thanks for listening. Thanks for making this the #1 show amongst moms in the AEC community. And we'll see you again next week. Thanks, everybody.